The plague doctor in ancient Babylon, 1700 years before Christ. Disease was divine punishment, fever meant the gods were angry, plague meant civilization had sinned. When people died by the hundreds, priests offered sacrifices, healers prayed, and everyone waited. For divine mercy, no one investigated, no one questioned, no one tried to understand what was actually killing people, until one physician decided that prayer without observation was just organized helplessness. This is the story of the doctor who looked at plague and saw patterns instead of punishment, who documented symptoms instead of accepting fate, and who discovered that the deadliest enemy of disease wasn't divine intervention, it was human observation. Meet Rabbit Shamash, 41 years old, royal physician to Hammurabi's court. For 19 years, he had treated the wealthy and powerful. Comfortable position, prestigious patients, safe distance from the diseases that ravaged Babylon's poor districts. But in the spring of 1695 BCE, disease didn't respect class boundaries. It started in the River District, the poorest neighborhood, where sanitation was worst and living conditions were brutal. A fever, then swelling, then death within 3 days. The first victims were dismissed as isolated cases. Bad luck, individual divine disfavor. But the disease spread. 5 deaths became 20. 20 became 50. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't random. This was an outbreak. The priests declared it divine punishment for the district's sins, recommended increased temple offerings and ritual purification. The city officials ordered the district quarantined, sealed it, let the disease burn itself out among the poor while protecting the wealthy neighborhoods. Rabbit Shamash watched from his comfortable position in the palace, treated court officials with minor ailments, prescribed herbs for indigestion, monitored the king's health. Safe, comfortable, distant from the dying poor, but something gnawed at him, a question that wouldn't quiet. What if this wasn't divine punishment? What if there was a pattern? Because that could be understood and stopped. The question violated everything physicians were taught. Disease came from the gods. Treatment meant appeasing divine anger through prayer and ritual. Investigating disease meant questioning divine will. Dangerous, heretical, professionally suicidal. But Rabbit Shamash couldn't ignore the question. He requested permission to enter the quarantine district, to observe the sick, to document symptoms, to look for patterns. The court physicians thought he was insane. You'll catch the disease, die with the poor. For what? We already know the cause. Divine displeasure. The solution is prayer, not observation. But Hammurabi approved the request. The king was practical. If Rabbit Shamash could find a way to stop the disease, the economic benefit would be substantial. Dead workers didn't pay taxes. If he died trying, the court would find another physician. Rabbit Shamash entered the quarantined district armed with clay tablets, writing tools, and no real protection except curiosity. What he found was devastating. Families huddled in small spaces, bodies lying in streets, the living too weak to bury the dead. Hell on earth. He began documenting everything, every symptom, every timeline, every detail of who got sick and who didn't. He interviewed survivors, asked about their activities before illness, about what they ate, where they went, who they touched, and he started seeing patterns. The disease affected some households completely while leaving adjacent ones untouched. It spread along certain streets but skipped others. It killed people who shared water sources but spared those who drew from different wells. Water. The common factor was water. He investigated the district's water sources, found 3 main wells. 2 were clean. 1 showed signs of contamination, greenish tint, bad smell. The families using that well were the ones dying. He tested his theory, mapped every household, marked which well they used. The correlation was undeniable. The contaminated wells users were dying. The clean wells users were surviving. This wasn't divine punishment. This was contaminated water causing disease. A natural cause with a natural solution. Stop using the bad well. Use the clean ones. Save lives. He brought his findings to city officials, showed his documentation, demonstrated the correlation, recommended closing the contaminated well, and providing alternative water access. The officials were skeptical. You're claiming to understand divine will through observation? Presumptuous. Dangerous. The priests have already explained this is punishment for sin. But Rabbi Shamash had something the priests didn't have. Data. Clay tablets filled with names, dates, locations, water sources. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed through appeals to divine mystery. He made a prediction. Close the contaminated well. Provide clean water. If I'm right, new cases will stop within a week. If I'm wrong, the disease will continue regardless. It was a testable claim. Either the water theory was correct, or it wasn't. The priests couldn't make testable predictions. They could only explain divine will after the fact. The officials, desperate and willing to try anything, closed the well, arranged alternative water distribution, and waited. New cases stopped. Within 5 days, the outbreak was clearly ending. Within 2 weeks, it was over. The correlation between closing the well and ending the disease was undeniable. Rabbi Shamash had done something unprecedented. He had stopped a plague through observation and intervention rather than prayer and sacrifice. He had proven that disease could have natural causes, that human action could prevent death. The implications were revolutionary. If this plague had a natural cause, maybe other diseases did too. Maybe divine punishment wasn't the explanation for all suffering. Maybe systematic observation could save lives. But the priests were furious. Rabbi Shamash was undermining religious authority, claiming that human understanding could solve problems traditionally attributed to divine will, teaching people that observation mattered more than prayer. They filed formal complaints, accused him of blasphemy, of reducing sacred mysteries to mundane explanations, of encouraging people to trust human knowledge over divine wisdom. The theological battle was fierce, but Rabbi Shamash had an advantage. He had saved lives. Hundreds of people who would have died were alive, because he had investigated rather than prayed. Results spoke louder than theological arguments. Hammurabi sided with effectiveness, issued a decree. Physicians would be required to investigate disease outbreaks, document symptoms, look for natural causes. Prayer was still permitted, but observation was now mandatory. It was a radical shift. Medicine moving from purely religious practice toward systematic investigation. Not abandoning faith, but adding evidence. Not rejecting divine power, but recognizing human agency. Rabbi Shamash was appointed chief investigative physician, given authority to examine disease outbreaks throughout Babylon. He trained other physicians in his methods, taught them to document symptoms, map cases, look for patterns. Over the next decade, he investigated 7 major outbreaks, found natural causes for 5 of them: contaminated food, insect-borne disease, person-to-person transmission. Each investigation added to medical knowledge. Each solved outbreak proved that observation worked. 2 outbreaks defied his understanding. He couldn't find natural causes, couldn't identify patterns. Those remained mysteries. He admitted this honestly, didn't claim to understand everything, just claimed that investigation revealed more than assumption. His honesty strengthened his credibility. He wasn't claiming to replace divine explanation with human certainty. He was claiming that some mysteries could be solved through careful observation while acknowledging that others remained beyond current understanding. The priests eventually accepted an uneasy compromise. Diseases with identifiable natural causes could be treated medically. Diseases without clear explanations remained in religious domain. Medicine and religion would coexist, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, always tension. Rabbi Shamash trained to generations of investigative physicians before he died at 63. His methods influenced Babylonian medicine for centuries. His documentation techniques spread to other civilizations: Egypt, Persia, Greece. Today, archaeologists find medical tablets from ancient Babylon, disease outbreak records, symptom documentation, treatment protocols, evidence that systematic medical investigation existed 3,700 years ago. Modern epidemiology, the study of disease patterns in populations, follows methods Rabbi Shamash pioneered. Documenting cases, mapping spread, looking for common factors, testing hypotheses through intervention. The foundation of public health started with a physician who asked, "What if this isn't divine punishment?" The plague doctor understood something that still matters. That observation can reveal what assumption obscures. That documentation creates knowledge while prayer creates comfort. That the greatest medical breakthrough isn't finding the cure, it's asking the right question. He didn't cure all disease, couldn't explain all suffering, but he proved that some deaths were preventable through human action rather than inevitable through divine will. That investigation could save lives where acceptance had let them die. The contaminated well that he closed saved hundreds, but the method he pioneered saved millions over subsequent centuries because he looked at plague and saw patterns, saw questions, saw possibilities, and refused to accept that divine mystery meant human helplessness. The Plague Doctor, Silent Babylon, where ancient civilizations speak.